Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment 140. Members, this removes the 5-patient limit per caregiver. I'm not sure by now, there's been so many bills through so many committees, maybe you all have heard all these issues before and you know exactly what we're talking about. But let's keep in mind that what we're trying to contemplate is for the most legitimate bona fide patients with disabilities with providers. That is the population that we are seeking to address. Caregivers, 5, let's just admit 5 is arbitrary. If you're a caregiver in a group home for the catastrophically disabled, you may have more than 5. There's a variety of situations where, well, then what do you do with your other, 6th person or your 7th person? It may not happen all that often. But I think if you take in whole all the other regulations that are being put in place, if you have a legitimate caregiver and a legitimate patient, the difference between 4 or 5 or 6 is frankly not the point if you look at what the rest of the bill puts in place as far as guardrails. But the reason it's worth removing this limit is our voters said that they believe medical marijuana is a right for very disabled people. And so by leaving the arbitrary 5-person cap, we are in effect will be denying access to some legitimate patients with some legitimate caregivers who are guaranteed this right under Amendment 20 on our Constitution. And I think if taken in isolation, it may seem like it's a big deal, but frankly, when you look at all the other regulations that the bill has, this just simply will prove to be a barrier for legitimately disabled people to get to legitimate care, and I don't think it's actually well supported. So this Amendment 140 is my attempt to remove what I think is an arbitrary barrier for the legitimate folks and ask for an aye vote.
The question is Senator Spence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was not an arbitrary decision to have a caregiver with 5 patients. The reason is because if you look at the restrictions on the number of plants that a patient can have or that a caregiver can have, it's 30. So if a caregiver has more than 5 patients, they can't have more than 30 plants. And so that's the way the formula works, and that's why the 5 patients per caregiver was negotiated with law enforcement to have to do with the number of plants and the amount of the number of ounces of product that a patient can have. So this is a no vote, and it wasn't arbitrary.
Senator Romer.
Thank you, members. And again, yes, in 5 years when we sunset this, I think we can revisit this. But for now, this is a guardrail that basically means that in no basement in Colorado, in no basement in your neighborhood, could anybody have more than 29, 30 plants. And I think that's a common sense rule for now. So let's just stick with the game plan that's been negotiated. Please vote no.
Senator Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just say that we should put people over plants here. Again, we're talking about disabled people, access to caregivers with the right they have in Colorado. Failing to adopt this will cut off some of those people who have this right. This is about people, not plants. Ask for an aye vote.
Question is the adoption of Senator Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I was listening to Senator Carroll's arguments quite carefully as an advocate for the disabled community. And in the group homes, I think that the existing bill will adequately serve the group homes, which is what I was really looking for and listening and caring about. That if in the group homes there are those individuals who qualify legitimately and need the medical marijuana, that they would be able to have their service according to the existing bill. So I would be a no vote on this amendment.
Question is the adoption of Floor Amendment 140. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
No!
The amendment is lost. Mr. McGowan, please read Floor Amendment 141.
Amendment 141 to House Bill 1284 by Senator Carroll, Amendment Grushko, Bill page 8, strike lines 4
Senator
through
Carroll.
14.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment 141. Members, thank you for your patience on the endurance with this. I'm trying to run the amendments that I think actually fix the problems in this bill. So it's not so much about counting votes or deals. Each of these, I think, are principled issues that we should be responsibly looking at before we pass this legislation. In moving Amendment 141, you'll recall in the current re-engrossed version of the bill that there's two provisions this addresses. One is that this authorizes a one-year moratorium, a concept that is found nowhere in the Constitution. And while there's an excellent section of the bill addressing local control, I think it is very appropriate for local authorities to have every which manner of regulation about size, shape, when, where, how they want to do this. But this bill makes a fatal constitutional error. And it goes up to and allowing them to ban it completely. When you have language in the Constitution, and you guys all know this out there, and it extends a right, we have no statutory authority to carve out new exceptions to what is a constitutional grant of authority. I'm under no illusion that this amendment will necessarily pass, but I am making a record because I believe that as long as this provision remains in the bill, and there probably will be a severability clause, but I believe at least this portion in particular is overreaching and unconstitutional. If the constitutional language in Amendment 20 said that we reserve the right for some communities to actually ban themselves out of this entirely, and this were an implementing statute to that, there would be no legal constitutional problem with doing that. The language, as we know, that really gave rise to this whole issue is in Article 18 of the Colorado Constitution, Section 14. I think most of you have read this by now. No one, I challenge, no one in this chamber can find me where we authorize an exception for a complete and total ban or moratorium in either form. So while this bill will probably go forward without the amendment is a chance to actually fix the constitutionality that I think jeopardizes some other aspects of the bill. We heard earlier in discussion about the bill, I think it was Senator Spence, that on arguing against the hours of operation that someone could do between 2 and 5. Yet the irony of this is that they are saying you can operate from the hours of 0 and never. And that's okay. We just don't want to limit it from 2 to 5, but never to never is fine. Folks, there is no authority for that. And while some people may want that, and some people may wish it was originally written to contemplate that, it wasn't. So the purpose of running this amendment is, one, to try and fix it, and if we cannot fix it, when this portion becomes litigated as clearly overreaching, what is preempted, if you will, or prohibited by a constitutional level granted right in here. Amendment 141 basically takes care of the moratorium and the outright ban. Obviously, in a place where there is a ban outright, we are talking about the complete and total prevention of access for disabled people to have access to this. So as a policy issue as well as a constitutional issue, I don't think it's a good idea. But even if you think it is a good idea that locals be able to ban this outright, I just don't think we're permitted to. And you can read it for yourself in the section of what's there. And if someone can come to the microphone and tell me where we're authorized to create carve-outs on bans, I'd be glad to see that. But it's not in there. So I ask for an aye vote on Amendment 141.